Do you guys think she understands a single damn word we're saying? Trent didn't even bother to lower his voice, a sneer playing on his lips as he glanced across the table. Derek chuckled and replied, "Probably not, but $1 billion deal for a silent Asian lady? I'd take that any day." That's how it began. A private $800 million dinner held at San Francisco's most exclusive rooftop restaurant, boasting panoramic views across the bay. But what should have been a historic partnership transformed into a silent war of glares, loaded silences, and condescension. Derek Caldwell, CEO of Valancourt Biotech, sat imperiously at one end of the table. His suit was perfectly tailored, his blond hair slicked back impeccably, and his smile held the self-satisfied air of a man who always won. Beside him was CFO Trent Langley, younger, sharper, with a dark suit and a flashy watch. They were a formidable pair, sharks in human form, cold, impatient, and absolutely confident in their own power. Opposite them sat Dr. Evelyn Hayes, the billionaire founder of Hoshiko AI, a technological pioneer. But tonight, she was an enigma. Silver hair neatly pinned back, a soft indigo silk dress, no jewelry, no makeup. Evelyn didn't utter a single word. Her assistant sat behind her, occasionally whispering translations. Evelyn merely listened, her eyes calm yet unreadable, making the two men increasingly uneasy. Trent leaned towards Derek, lowering his voice just enough so Evelyn couldn't hear. "She's like a statue, isn't she? How are we supposed to do business with someone who won't even open her mouth?" Derek smirked, taking a sip of red wine. "As long as she signs the contract, she can be a statue or whatever she wants. $1 billion without having to hear a peep. What a steal." Evelyn remained motionless. Her gaze tracked the two men, but her expression betrayed nothing, as if their words were just passing breezes. The initial toasts were awkward. Derek raised his bourbon glass with the confidence of a man accustomed to setting the tone. "To global partnerships," he declared, "and to a future where science knows no borders." He smiled broadly as if he'd just delivered a magazine-worthy quote. Evelyn simply nodded, raised her glass in silence, and took a sip. A young server, Chloe Davies, stood nearby. She worked quietly, but her eyes missed nothing. Every word, every condescending glance registered. Chloe saw Evelyn's discomfort, felt the tension in the air. Trent snapped his fingers at Chloe, not even looking at her. "Hey, sweetie, another bottle of that Shiraz. We're going to need it." Chloe felt the venom hidden in that tone. Not a request, but a dismissive command, the way Sweetie sounded more like a leash than a compliment. She poured the wine without a word. Her hands were steady, but her eyes observed every subtle gesture. Then Trent leaned back, rolling his eyes as Evelyn's assistant translated another brief response. "You know," Trent said loudly, "we could probably just replace her with a chatbot. We get more interaction." Derek sniggered in agreement. Chloe, standing nearby, caught a fleeting glimpse of Evelyn's face. Still composed, but a flicker of something crossed her eyes. A knowing glance of a wound, quickly concealed. They weren't talking to her, but through, around, and above her. Chloe Davies always knew how to be invisible. She'd been taught it over the years, not by words, but by subtle experiences. In classrooms where she was the only black student. In stores where she was watched instead of welcomed. In interviews where people smiled but never called back. In this restaurant, invisibility was part of the job. Seamless service, light footsteps, eyes downcast, hands swift, never speaking unless spoken to. Yet, Chloe hadn't always lived in the shadows. There was a time her world was vibrant with color and sound. That was Kyoto, Japan. Her mother was a diplomat, and Chloe spent her formative years on cobblestone streets chasing cicadas and folding paper cranes with children who never once cared about her different skin color. She learned Japanese before she learned sarcasm or how to defer. The language stayed with her, not just in memory, but in inflection and instinct. She remembered the weight of each word, the rhythm of inherent respect in every phrase. She remembered the bows, not just of the body, but of genuine intent. That world had once been hers. Upon returning to the U.S., Chloe quickly learned the bitter truth. Her fluent Japanese was only valued if the speaker wasn't a young black woman. Her unique story wasn't exotic enough to impress, and her intelligence was constantly questioned because she didn't fit preconceived notions of excellence. At 24, Chloe was juggling grueling shifts, student loan debt, and secret artistic dreams. She worked 2 jobs to pay for art school in Oakland, painting at night and sketching on the subway. She served wine with a quiet confidence because she knew her own worth, even if no one in this room saw it. But tonight, watching Evelyn Hayes sit there, enduring the dismissive slights and false pleasantries, something stirred powerfully within Chloe. She didn't just see a silent billionaire. She saw someone fighting a similar silent battle. A person with power, yet still overlooked because of her voice, her gender, and her silence. And Chloe knew this silence all too well. She'd worn it like armor for years. But tonight, that armor began to crack. Evelyn remained still, composed and poised, answering each question with a few precise words through her assistant. Her silence was unwavering, her tone respectful, but to the men opposite her, it was profoundly irritating. Finally, Trent let out a dramatic sigh, tossed his napkin onto the table, and then leaned forward with a challenging smirk. "We want to buy your company," he stated, enunciating each word as if speaking to a toddler. "Do you understand?" Derek laughed, not because the statement was funny, but because he thought he was in control. "Maybe we should get some flashcards out," he added, his voice laced with contempt. Chloe almost dropped the wine carafe in her hand. Her back was turned as she stood by the service station, pretending to check the wine list, but her ears burned, her fingers tightening on the edge of the counter. It wasn't just the mockery. It was the tone, the assumption that if someone didn't speak their way, they were somehow inferior. Evelyn blinked slowly once. She didn't flinch, didn't react, but the air in the room shifted subtly. Trent smirked again. "I mean, seriously, is this a business deal or a mime show?" And then came the final insult. Soft, but sharp. "I swear, man," Trent muttered to Derek, not realizing Chloe was just steps away. "This is like negotiating with a bonsai tree." Derek chuckled. "Silent, decorative, probably older than it looks." Chloe turned slowly, her heart hammered not from fear, but from a surge of anger. She glanced at Evelyn, still unreadable, still poised, but Chloe saw it. The slight shift in her jaw, the silent storm behind those eyes. Evelyn looked up, and this time her gaze wasn't empty. It lingered on Chloe, a fleeting look like a spark passing between two souls. Evelyn gave a subtle nod, an almost imperceptible movement, but to Chloe it was a signal, a silent acknowledgement. Chloe remained silent, but this time it was a determined silence. She simply met Evelyn's eyes directly, a look of profound understanding, as if an invisible thread connected the two women. Then she gently placed a cell phone on the table. It was positioned so all three, Evelyn, Derek, and Trent, could clearly see it. Derek and Trent initially paid no attention to the phone. They were still smirking, awaiting some feeble reaction from Evelyn after their latest insult. But Evelyn didn't respond. Instead, a slow, cold, and utterly powerful smile began to spread across her lips. It wasn't a social smile, but the smile of someone holding all the cards. Derek and Trent saw that smile, and the self-satisfaction on their faces began to fade, replaced by a touch of confusion. "What's wrong, Doctor? Hayes? Is there anything we can clarify? Your assistant is still translating, right?" Evelyn still didn't answer Derek. She slowly raised her hand, making a gentle gesture towards her assistant. The assistant immediately understood, closed her notebook, and stepped back, ceding the stage entirely to Evelyn. Then, in a silence as taut as a wire, Evelyn slowly spoke. Her voice rang out in perfect, unaccented English, clear and chillingly authoritative. "I don't need a translator." The words were a direct slap across the two men's faces. Derek and Trent's expressions instantly stiffened, their smiles vanishing. Their eyes widened in astonishment and disbelief. "What? You speak English?" Evelyn merely smiled a little more, her gaze sweeping over their stunned faces, then settling on the phone Chloe had placed. "I've heard enough. In fact, I've heard everything, from beginning to end." As she spoke, she raised her thumb, touching the screen of Chloe's phone. The screen lit up, displaying a recording icon with a duration that stretched back throughout the evening. Derek and Trent stared at the icon, then at Evelyn, then back at the phone. Cold sweat began to bead on their foreheads. Their blood ran cold. "You. What the hell did you do?" "As you said, a billion-dollar deal needs transparency. I wanted to ensure that all your friendly remarks, every disparaging comment for this silent sushi doll or decorative bonsai, were carefully recorded." Evelyn emphasized each word, her eyes as sharp as daggers, not a trace of the mysterious woman's composure left. She had shed her mask of silence, and now the true power of a tech billionaire was fully revealed. Derek and Trent looked at each other, their faces ashen. A perfect flip. The room fell into a dead silence. The two men were still reeling in shock, their eyes glued to the phone on the table, where the evidence of their arrogance and racism was stored. "Evelyn, wait. This is a misunderstanding. We were just joking. You know, business banter." Derek stammered, trying to salvage some semblance of honor. Trent quickly chimed in, his face pale. "That's right, just a way to break the ice. We didn't mean anything by it. The contract is still on the table, Dr. Hayes." Evelyn didn't let them finish. She raised her hand, a simple but powerful gesture that silenced the two men. The cold smile remained on her lips, but there was no humor in her eyes. "There's no misunderstanding here, gentlemen. I was very clear about what I wanted from this meeting. An opportunity for Hoshiko AI and Valancourt Biotech to grow together." She paused, her gaze sweeping over Derek and Trent's increasingly desperate faces. "But what I received was disrespect, disparaging remarks, and an attitude I will never tolerate in any partnership. I came here to discuss business, not to be your entertainment." Trent swallowed hard, trying to compose himself. "But our contract. We've prepared everything. This is a huge opportunity for Hoshiko AI." Evelyn shook her head gently, as if brushing away meaningless dust. "Opportunity? You think I'm going to entrust my technology, the future of my company, to men who called me a silent sushi doll or an old bonsai tree? She gestured to her assistant, who quickly placed another set of documents on the table, right next to the phone. It was an identical copy of the contract Derek and Trent had presented. Evelyn picked it up and ripped it decisively, without a moment's hesitation. The sound of tearing paper echoed clearly in the silent room. "This deal, gentlemen, is terminated, and it will never be reinstated." Derek and Trent stared wide-eyed at the shredded papers on the table. Utter shock was etched on their faces. "You can't do that. Our reputation." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, crossing her